The power of obedience, unlocking God's plan for you and generations. Obedience to God is not just about personal faith, it can influence the course of history and affect future generations. Disobedience, on the other hand, can derail divine plans, not only for individuals but also for the collective destiny of an entire generation. When God crafts a plan for your life, it requires your cooperation and absolute obedience to fulfill its purpose. God, though omnipotent, seeks our submission to his will in order to manifest his divine purposes. Through the Bible, we witness how both obedience and disobedience have profound ripple effects across time. The importance of obedience in fulfilling God's will. One of the most compelling examples of obedience is found in the story of Joseph and Mary. Upon receiving divine instruction, they fled to Egypt to escape Herod's massacre. This act of obedience ensured the survival of the infant Jesus, the Savior of humanity. Without their immediate response, God's plan for salvation could have been endangered. Their obedience demonstrated how crucial it is to follow God's directives, no matter how difficult or inconvenient they may have seemed. Another powerful example is Noah. In a time when wickedness was rampant on the earth, God commanded Noah to build an ark in preparation for a coming flood. Despite being mocked by those around him, Noah obeyed. His obedience not only preserved his own family but ensured the survival of mankind and many other species or animals. Had Noah disobeyed, the future of humanity would have been at risk. His example reminds us that obedience is sometimes required to preserve life and safeguard God's greater purposes. Disobedience and its consequence. Disobedience, on the other hand, can have tragic consequences. The story of Israel's journey to the promised land is a profound lesson in the dangers of disobedience. God promised the Israelites a land flowing with milk and honey, but their disobedience delayed them for 40 years in the wilderness. Despite God's miraculous intervention, their lack of faith and repeated act of rebellion caused many to die in the wilderness without ever seeing the land God had promised them. This disobedience did not just affect individuals, it delayed the entire nation from entering into the fullness of God's promise. Similarly, Cain's disobedience after the murder of his brother Abel created a significant delay in God's plan. Cain's sin introduced a period of moral decay and suffering that sets back the progress of humanity. The act of disobedience is a stark reminder that human rebellion can cause delay in God's purpose for mankind. It was only after Cain's lineage that God began working through Seth's descendants to restore his plan for humanity. The battle against spiritual forces is important to remember that there are other forces working against God's will for your life. These forces, whether internal or external, seek to derail God's plan and make his power seem irrelevant in our lives. However, God's power is never truly diminished. It is our willingness to submit to his will that determines how much of his divine power is manifested in our life. In Ephesians 6 verse 12, Paul reminds us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. This means that in addition to personal temptation and disobedience, there are spiritual forces actively working to prevent us from fulfilling God's plan. Understanding this spiritual dynamic is key to remaining vigilant and obedient, as disobedience not only affects us but can impact generations to come. Conclusion: the call of absolute obedience. God's plan for your life requires your obedience. Whether it's as seemingly simple as changing your location, as in the case of Joseph and Mary, or as monumental as building an ark like Noah, obedience is vital to ensuring that God's plan for your life and generations after you comes to fruition. Disobedience, on the other hand, can delay or even derail those plans. By choosing to obey God, you partner with him in bringing his will to pass. Not just for yourself, but for those who will come after you. God seeks obedience because it is key to unlocking his power and purpose in the world. Let us be mindful of the lasting impact of our obedience or disobedience can have on our lives and the lives of future generations.